Well, I'm going to go over some of the worst things to have that are being the most unnecessary in the case where the stuff really hit the fan, and some of the best things you need to get. And actually, I've been putting some of the best things you need to get, maybe not the most quality, but I'll get to that. Knives is probably an important high up thing to have. That's a useful tool that can last you a long period of time. Very important to get a good knife, but if you can't afford a good knife or whatever, even so, you want to get extras. Um, Electronics is probably my top on the list for what's going to go by the wayside if there's like an extreme problem in society. And really, what I think is one of two things. First off, I mentioned on this channel several times over that we're going into the mini ice age, and now I think it was the Carrington event in 1859 that happened during the last mini ice age. We don't need to have a nuclear war. We don't need to have a terrorist attack. We don't need to on our infrastructure or grid or anything like that, or hackers bring the electric grid down. It could just be a natural event, and it's not like don't hold your breath for it to happen. But I have to tell you that it's most likely to happen where you have solar flares knocking out electronics is during the time of when you have the mini ice age, which we're coming up into. Now, the mini ice age, we're just coming up to the beginning of it. It's been going on, just starting. You probably see, like in 2007 and 2008 and 2010, there has been severe weather in the Northeast. Now, I know there's stuff going on right now in Morocco and all kind. Maybe it's not in your area, but in other parts of the world, they're hitting crazy record lows, and it's the beginning of it. So this might not even happen for 10 years, assuming it happens, right? But even in the meantime, I don't know, because not even outside the realm of the mini ice age and all that kind of, and that's not theory. That's a fact that's coming up, and it's pretty damn likely we'll have a severe solar flare that'll knock out a lot of electronics and knock out the power grid sometime during that time. But it could be from anywhere from now to 2060. So I don't know when. But I think what might be coming up is I notice there's a lot of elements in the world that seem to be like trying to push Vladimir Putin's buttons the wrong way and start some kind of garbage, which I am against. I'm not trying to say I want this to happen, but that I think would actually happen before there was ever a freaking solar flare or something. Well, in that case, if anything like that happened, I'm just saying, not that we have an all-out nuclear war, but I'll give you an example on this deal with, because I know like how do people talk about this stuff. That stuff hits the end of stuff hits the fan, the end of the world, and all this crap. It's not the end of the world. The deal is, and I'll give you the reality, and probably something you probably don't know. Like you heard of the Strategic Arms Treaty, right? Strategic arms, the word strategic, that's certain nukes over with a certain strength. Well, they don't cover anything regarding tactical nukes. Tactical nukes are small nukes that can knock out a quarter mile, a third of a mile, and also the devastation from them, from the nuclear blast, would knock out electronics in key areas, which and there's no regulation on what you could do with EMP bombs and all this other stuff. So right now there's actually an arms race in its strategic nuclear weapons and other high-tech weapons that I know are going to knock out all these freaking electronic weapons if there's anything that happens. I mean, it's devices. So they're junk. I mean, it's not like they're junk that they don't do anything for us. They do things for us. But, and you could talk about Faraday cages and all that. Fine. But I'm going to reserve one thing for the Faraday cage more than anything. I wish we could put everything in the Faraday cage. But that's not the reality. But this stuff is actually, and over the years, I could tell you, I've invested a lot in electronics. I was always on the cutting edge way back when. Not so much electronics, but also in the types of servers are out there when NT server and stuff was around and all this garbage. Always getting the best stuff. And to me, it was a waste of money. Everything I got way back when, 15 years ago or 10 years ago, it's a pile of junk today. Things I got 50 years ago, like knives, a K-bar knife, an old-timer, made in USA knife, another Buffalo Skinner made in Germany. They're still good, they're still good. This is a very, very important tool. Now, I did recently post a lot of knife videos. Some of them are cheaper knives that are actually good for bang for the buck. Some are better quality, different various qualities. But this is something really to invest in more than electronics. I mean, you could buy yourself an iPhone, even with your 2-year contract. It might cost you a couple $100, but you can get a few good knives for that, high quality ones for $80 each, or even $50 sometimes if you're looking around really hard, depending on if it's how big it is. This is something that's a very useful tool because, well, you could start fires with it, even if you don't have the right, fire starting equipment. Because if you find the right kind of rock, you can make sparks with the knife, especially if it's carbon steel, not stainless steel, because stainless steel has a more trouble making sparks for some reason. But but the thing is, you can also cut the wood up into fine enough, shavings, make your feather sticks and all that type of stuff. Because that's another thing, boy, fire. You got to be able to make fire, and to make fire, knife is very important, and also an axe. An axe is very important. Now, as far as guns are very important. And I'm going to tell you one thing. I know that they talk a lot about the lowly 22 or the 12 gauge shotgun. What you might really want is just a plain old 38 or 357 single action revolver. The reason I'm saying that is because the shells don't eject. Now, you could say that also with a 12 gauge single shot, but then you might want to have 6 shots versus 1 shot. And you can reload this stuff. You can reload them real easy by hand. There's no auto ejecting, so if, say, you're reloading them, you're not sizing the brass perfect, you can still get them in there so they work and knock them out. Because just in other words, a single action where you're knocking out one piece of brass at a time instead of all of them, right? I mean, this is a good tool too, because it's very simple. And still you got 6 shots. Very important. Nothing's going to really affect it. Probably good to get this in stainless steel. Probably one of your better bets. For higher quality stainless steel for regular blued steel, because of the weather elements. Sometimes if, say, anything broke on it, like a spring, you could probably it'll still work most of the time with a lot of stuff. I mean, it depends on what spring broke. But for the most part, it's pretty impervious to a lot of stuff. Now, it's always better to have high-tech weapons, but high-tech is a problem. The 22 is actually more complicated, even a simple, unless you're talking like single shots, or maybe even a 22 pistol. But I would prefer like a 357 that takes a 38 special, and something like that. That's very important. Another thing you want to get is a fishing pole. You want to have something where you can fish with. You want lures, anything, because one of the best foods you can get is fish. And I also want to mention this: if you got, in your whatever, if you want to store up some supplies, I'm going to tell you, you're not supposed to do this today. I mean, with your fishing license, you get in big trouble. But I'm talking about in a survival situation. Like, for instance, if you put some bread out there and the fish are biting, well, you throw a Super M80 in there, and I'm talking about, you're dying, and if you need the food and nobody's around to give you, there's no food or nothing. You put some bread out there on the water and let it float, and the fish start biting it. You throw a Super M80 in it, and the fish get shocked, and they just come up to the top, and you get them. It's a fast way to fish. Not that I ever done that, but just want to, I don't, it's like how many people are going to have Super M80s? I don't know. But, that's the fast way to fish. Another thing is a crossbow. Now, I would actually rate the crossbow, in a lot of ways, I rate it more important. Now, I'm talking about not just for hunting per se, but, well, it is for hunting, but I'm saying is, yeah, I mean, it's a lot simpler to take the wild game with a rifle than a crossbow. I know that. I realize that. But a crossbow doesn't require as much skill as using a compound bow with some kind of long bow, survival bow. You got better sights on it. It's faster, more powerful, more compact. The other thing is, the main thing, though, is it's quiet. If you're looking to knock down some game someplace, get yourself a 150-pound deer. Now, you don't want to alert everybody that you shot a deer for like 5 miles around. You don't want to do that. That's why, I mean, yeah, I mentioned the pistol, fine, but the pistol, you know, I really would really more rely on the crossbow for hunting. But the pistol is something you can carry around with you, and like I said, when you fire it, it doesn't, that single action army revolver. I mean, yeah, I know it's not the high tech stuff, but it doesn't eject that brass, and you might need to reutilize that brass. And even if you don't have the reloading supplies to do that, that brass will be worth money or exchange for something. And I don't know if people, if the freaking stuff really went down, I don't think there's gonna be too much friendly exchange. There's gonna be warfare all over the place. Another thing you want to have is the right clothing, which includes deuce gear, which is not really clothing, but like regular deuce gear. Now, this is some real old tech stuff right here. You're talking M14 with the bandolier pouches and your canteens, your first aid kit, and all that, your field pack. It's got a K-bar knife on it, but you want to have, and don't worry about getting the latest, greatest stuff. I mean, you can get something from the early 60s. It's fine. I mean, this World War II, this brand new, and I'm not talking reproduction made in China. I'm talking about genuine, brand new stuff from World War II that you could still buy out there. That sometimes is very cheap. Bayonets. I mean, a real one, a real M7 bayonet. Well, maybe they're getting a little more money right now, but I bought some pretty good stuff way back when, 20 years ago, and they're still available. But I also realized in some areas, some of this military stuff is still available, even from the Vietnam era. Don't worry about getting the latest, greatest. As long as it's genuine mil-spec stuff. Usually you're not going too wrong with that. You want to have the deuce gear because, I know a person's not going to be walking around all over the place, just wandering around like a bushman. But wherever you have your base, say for instance, whether it's a rock and log shelter, you're going to wander away from that at times, and you want to be prepared for whatever happens. So you need deuce gear with canteens, first aid kit, and all this garbage. I should mention one thing here, where there's a couple things probably with tech that I think are going to be very important. Well, this is a really, really old school freaking I think it's from the 1940s or 50s, I think up to maybe the early 60s, the Zenith transoceanic shortwave radio. I'm going to tell you, a lot of these electronics from way, way, way back, they're way more robust than the crap today. Way more robust. And even the Japanese stereos from like when they're first coming over here in the United States, a lot of that stuff is way more. I know there's a cult out there for people buying that junk, but one thing you really want to have more than anything is a method of communication with not just. I mean, yeah, it'd be nice to have a CB radio, two-way radios, marine band radio, and all that kind of crap. But really, you'd want to know what's going on in the world, and that's your shortwave radio, and you really want to be able to communicate back and forth. If there's one thing you want to keep in your Faraday cage, is something like this. And actually, I think if you got stuff that's uses vacuum tubes or something, you'll be all right. It's probably what the hell needs to be done, man. It needs to go back, way back, before the electronic crap was around. Because, I mean, yeah, I remember the old TVs when you turned them on, you had to wait for them to warm up. The TV guy would come by and I remember. Well, I'm older, man. I'm in my 60s. I remember that. I remember when nobody even had a color TV, man. I think they started getting more popular. Well, even the networks in the 50s, they didn't have any color TVs. But the stuff back then, it wasn't like, in other words, if there was an EMP back then, it wouldn't have mattered. I think your TVs would have still worked with all those vacuum tubes. So sometimes, some of this stuff might be better to keep. But, if you're getting, another thing you might want to have too is optics, but non-electronic optics, like binoculars, telescope, that type of stuff. And one thing I think is very important is have some silver. Because you can, Yeah, I mean, it's not the be all end all of anything, but sometimes you don't have time to boil water or something like that. If you make some colloidal silver and you have that on hand and you put it in the water, well, that could be very useful. I mean, there's a long, long list you could freaking say you want, but I'm going to tell you that really, if you're talking about stuff hits the fan for real, in other words, just think common sense. If something like really drastic happens, what happens to society, it's just going to go back to the way it was 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago. Like the Amish, the way the Amish live. It's like, what do the Amish use for, in surviving? Farm tools, hammers, axes, wood splitters, wood burning stove, right? If it depends on where yeah, that would be another thing. I left that out. But they don't have any electronics. Now they do have solar. They use solar. That's fair and square for the Amish. But there's a limit to even what you can do with that because the diodes are how is that protected? What about the voltage regulator that goes with the solar? I mean all that stuff's going to get fried. So one of the things I'm going to tell you, because I know some of these people that are well, not I don't know them, but I mean, I see this all over the internet about preppers getting the latest gadgets for a range finder to GPS. I mean, it's fine, fine. Yeah, I mean, GPS is great, but you got to understand that compass. It's another one. You want to know how to do land nav without GPS. You want to know how to read a map. I mean, yeah, I mean, electronics is cool for freaking looking up all kinds of stuff that you need to know. But, to me, electronics is great for its information storage. But the latest, greatest gizmos are really the worst things to freaking be concentrating on for stuff hits the fan. They're not going to do you, and I think all this stuff is going to get fried if something like drastic happens. Now, I know I talked about a repeat of the Carrington effect of the Carrington event of 1859 during this next upcoming mini ice age. Now that's not set in stone, but it's very, very likely to happen. We don't know what happened during the Maunder minimum. What happened in the 1600s. I bet you there was even more of a Carrington event than in 1859 back in the 1600s, but nobody had electronics or back in 1859 how we knew about it was because people had the telegraphs and the telegraph lines got all fried and everything like that. Today that would knock out everything in one shot. I don't know I think that's probably got at least a dozen years from now. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think it's going to happen when we really get into the closer to the bottom of the mini ice age. In the absolute bottom of the mini ice age is supposed to be between 2035 and 2050. So, but I think in the meantime, the way these people are pushing Vladimir Putin's buttons left and right, pissing him off, and I'm like, I'm not a fan of Vlad, but the way they're pushing his buttons left and right, I think something's gonna happen between now and then. And like I mentioned before, we don't have any treaties with any other nations regarding tactical nuclear weapons, EMP weapons, and things that can knock down a smart grid and all this kind of crap. We don't have any kind of the nuclear arms treaties are about strategic nuclear weapons only. So, I mean, I'm telling you reality on it. I mean, I don't want that to happen, but I think it is. I think it is going to happen, man. So don't be concentrating on this. Electronics is cool for convenience, but don't be concentrating on buying too much of that stuff. And the one thing I would buy is probably a old school quality shortwave. That'd be, I mean, there's a lot of things that would be nice you could stick in your Faraday cage, but there's a limit. There's a limit to what you can do. You got a limit of how much you could store, a limit to what you could take with you. It's nice to have everything, but you gotta really pick and choose what's really is most essential. And the least essential is going to be all these gee whiz electronic gadgets. You want simple, mil-spec stuff, dew gear, knives, axe, crossbow, fishing pole, all that kind of crap. You don't want to be going down the high-tech area route because that is a dead end, and more than likely, you got night vision scopes. I got night vision scopes, the cheap ones, but they work. Um, they're going to be fried. That stuff's going to be fried. So just a word to the wise. You know, keep it simple, stupid, and think back 150 years ago what you would need. Don't think about now. Think like 150 years ago because that's going to be the scenario if something really crazy happens. You know, I just think they're pushing Vladimir Putin's button. I don't think the guy wants to do anything at all. Vladimir Putin. I think he's trying to avoid problems, but they're pulling his chain plenty of times, and I'm thinking one of these days, that's it. Anyway, over and out.